PhD's common reading of Coates' book, Between the World and Me, started thinking about which artists we wanted to put in this show that would really look at, the body, the male body in particular. And there were some obvious choices, and I was talking with some of our collectors and their agents, and was told you really need to know Mildred Howard's work. So I am so thrilled that we were able to borrow pieces and put those in our show. I mean, I was not as familiar with your work as I should be, but I can't wait to hear more. So, Mildred Howard is a resident of Berkeley. She has an interesting history of education and what you've been doing until you've got, because you keep reinventing yourself and what you do is what I take from this. Received an Associate of Arts degree and a certificate in fashion arts from the College of Alameda in 1977, and an MFA in 1985 in textile arts, I think, from John F. Kennedy University. She began her artistic life as a dancer. This is from Wikipedia, so if it's not true, you'll have to change that. And turned to installation and mixed media collage. She is the recipient of 2 Rockefeller Fellowships, a Joe Mitchell Award, an NEA Fellowship in Sculpture, and more. And like Gay, I think I mentioned upstairs, she's represented by England Gilbert Gallery in New York. Her work has been shown in art galleries all across the United States and internationally in Berlin, Cairo, London, Paris, Venice, and art institutions closer to home, the Oakland Museum, the Dion Museum, SF MoMA, San Jose Museum of Art, and the Museum of the African Diaspora. I'm just touching on it. You can Google, look up, learn more about Mildred. But we won't waste more time because we want to hear what you have to say and show us. So thank you so much for being here.
I'd like to also thank Jill for including me in this exhibition and coming up to Eugene and getting to know the place. And thank all their staff members. And since I'm a visual thinker, I'm going to read what I have to say. My work draws from historical and contemporary experiences. It is an ongoing inquiry considering identity, meaning, and their relationship to objects, and on various planes from the personal to the universal. I use found materials in my work, the everyday and ready-made, things that have multiple meanings. I attempt to set a dialogue that defines territories of understanding between objects and environment, memory and experience. My life as an artist shifts back and forth between media, sculpture, installation, public art, and assemblage. And I want to read a quick quote from Ta-Nehisi's book about all the political things that are happening right now. At this moment, the phrase police reform has come into vogue, and the actions of our policy appointed guardians have attracted attention, presidential and pedestrian. You may have heard the talk of diversity, sensitivity training, and body cameras. These are all fine and applicable, but they understate the task and allow the citizen of this country to pretend that there is real distance between their own attitudes and those of the ones appointed to protect them. And another quote I'd like to read is from Rebecca Solnit. Rebecca Solnit lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she's an author and writer, and specifically as it relates to social commentary. It is important to say that what hope is not, it is not the belief that everything was, is, or will be fine. The evidence is all around us of tremendous suffering and tremendous destruction. The hope I'm interested in is about broad perspectives with specific possibilities one that invite or demand that we act. It is also not a sunny everything is getting better narrative, though it may be a center to everything getting better. Worse narrative, you will call it an account of complexities and uncertainties with openings and closings. Hope doesn't mean defining realities. It means facing them and addressing them by remembering what else the 21st century has brought us, including the movement, heroes, and shifts in consciousness that address these things now. So what I showed you are things that my work is really influenced by what is happening, how things impact me and him impact all of us who share this world together. And so for the last 40 years, I have, as I said, I've switched back and forth between media. This is a piece that I did in 1989 as a result of receiving the Adeline Ken Award at the San Francisco Art Institute. And the piece had been milling around in my head for ages, and I wasn't able to respond to it when school children were shot down because they wanted to learn English as opposed to Afrikaans. And then we have today, the first time Kaepernick did not stand up, it was just, the news was all over. He is a San Francisco 49er, and you've probably seen him. But now he's on the cover of Time magazine. So you see how one's attitude can shift by one person making a statement. So I love this statement by Toni Morrison. There's no such thing as race. Race is a construct, a social construct, and it has its benefits. Money can be made off of it. People who don't like themselves can feel better because of it. It can describe certain kinds of behavior that are wrong or misleading. So racism has no function, but race can only be defined as a human being. The history of the United States and the few missing parts is part of a body of work that I've been working on for years. And this piece really happened by happenstance. I was working on another piece and decided to drill holes in a book to make a stack maybe 20 feet high. And when I opened the page, one page talked about those coming into Ellis Island, and the other one talked about Toussaint Overture and Native Americans and the battle that was going on at the time between those. But I feel that that's so relevant into today's world because many of us in this room often wondered why history doesn't really talk about us. So here it is. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful verse, but all of us didn't come that way. And in 1994, I was invited to have a show at the Oakland Museum. And initially, I wasn't going to do it, and they said, well, you can do whatever you want. So I decided to do rooms that pertain to 3 different decades of my life, and this was one. I mean, the Black Panther Party started in Oakland, California, which is the city that neighbors Berkeley. And one of the great things about their program was the free breakfast program. And now all over the country that's available. We hope that it will stay that way. And Crossings is a piece that began at the Berkeley Art Center and then moved to several places throughout the country, and then eventually to Bath, England, and to Cairo. And it really addresses the Middle Passage, where 15 million Africans said 15 million died through the Middle Passage. So it's about the fragility of life and the substance of life. And my works on paper. And I think the last pieces will deal with just the works on paper. Okay. These images are from a series of work called, that I did at Sharks Inc. in Colorado. Sharks Inc. is a fine arts press, and they invite artists there to do prints. And so you have not only master printers, but all their assistants to work with. And I had inherited of 2 volumes of books called Our Island People. They were from 1898. And I decided to take them apart. They had been, well, imagine taking an 1898 book apart. But I decided to use them because they had been around our family for years. And then I juxtaposed the images onto these, because when you look at the world, you don't think about it in terms of borders. So it's questioning that whole notion of borders and what that means and how you feel about it. On one side, you have this woman with the mask over her face, and then the other with that's taken place in Cuba, and Obama's speech on Cuba. Which takes you to the millennials. The Millennial series in XYZ combines photographs of young relatives and students and media images of popular rappers. These figures are printed in a manner suggesting the familiar, grainy, or black and white news photographs, and are set against the collage backdrop of naturally faded newspapers from the mid-1940s. The newspapers once the meaning of which a majority of Americans received their impression of the rest of the world, particularly the other side of the tracks. As the distance between communities recede at the turn of the 21st century, hip-hop, an African-American invention, has become the lingua franca of an entire generation all over the world. The black man in America, says Paul Mooney, is the most copied man on the planet, bar none. Whether imitated or villainized, today's black youth are defining the extent that recalls the civil rights era. Redlining, contract lending, Bill Connor, Strom Thurmond, the racist heritage of the 20th century seems anachronistic when paired with images of today's youth. Robes of desert people, silhouettes sometimes recall those that black men who are still faced with a culture that pathologizes them based on black and white worldview of an earlier era. It is any wonder that they might dress like desert wanderers as they traverse this inhospitable landscape, confronted with an entire nation still grappling with poisonous legacy of the centuries past. And I had to say this because I have 2 grandsons, and a number of nieces and nephews have been subjected to some of the things that have happened in the news today. And fortunately, none of them have been killed as a result. But if you look at these images and you look at the newspapers that the images are placed on, they're placed on top of things that are still happening today. We have Jay-Z with the sunglasses on. One of my students from China in the lower right-hand corner, and this is my grandson, and then, we've all seen the baggy pants. But what's interesting about this is that if it were not for these young people, then there would be people like Jay-Z, or on the opposite one, Nicki Minaj, they wouldn't even be around or be popular. So in some ways, they really remind me of the 60s and the times that we were going through then. Um, I had a box of washing powder with the Gold Dust Twins on it for years, and I was invited to another fine arts press, Magnolia Editions, and so I decided to do a whole series and put myself in different decades on these boxes, and what I did was I also changed some of the coins. So on some you will see a coin of Sacagawea, and on the other ones you'll see different coins of African Americans. And this is my current body of work. And I'm going to read you a little bit about this. And on the left is most of them are artists or women who've done a lot. Squeak Conworth, who is pretty well known, and Lava Thomas on this one. I've been a witness to this game is the title of my current body of work, begun at Sharks Inc. in Colorado, to be continued and expanded. To travel diasporically is to seize upon what Gladstone calls slippage between place and imagination, memory qualified only perhaps by the invention of reconstructive memory. Each print incorporates elements from traditional competitive games like cards or bingo, combined with imagery from the civil rights era, the South. Against this backdrop, I have placed figures of women, mostly friends, family, and contemporaries of mine, all of whom have been a witness displaying courage, ignoring the arbitrary restrictions, rules, and glass ceilings upon them as they navigate the game of existence, of success, a game in which women, particularly women of color, are expected to serve as pawns without agency or strength. The entire game is, of course, a myth, fueled by lies and greed, an artificial construct as anachronistic as the 19th century engraving of a Southern Belle's debutante gown. The women who surround me today are living proof of its emptiness. To contribute to the swagger and nerve they exhibit as they slip past the boundaries of an ignorant system. We are all diminished by this game. But as even it constricts our right to serve, our very right to breathe, these women bravely continue to sing out their stories and the game they must play to serve as both biography and metaphor, speaking to a larger story of what it means to make a life for oneself and to find some sense of pride of American identity in a nation still grappling with poisonous legacy of the past century's prejudices and mistakes. It is probably no coincidence that I now find myself making my most politically engaged work on the eve of a national election in which this legacy of prejudice looms as a very real and present threat. It is crucial that these stories be told today, that we confront our history and our present with eyes open to both its tragedy and its beauty. And so I want to close by reading a poem. And Catherine Smith is a poet and writer who lives in Washington, D.C. And I met her while I was a artist in resident at Atlantic Center for the Arts. And I was so moved by her work until I have invited her to participate in a big public art piece that I'm doing in San Francisco, where she will develop a poem that will span a sidewalk and a plaza. And she places herself within the context as if she were the artist. So she's speaking as if she were Edgar Degas. I once had good friends. I once was admired, was even loved for drawing skill, for what my hand did well with brush and oil, the sketch that gave blank foolscap a human face. I like to have my friends at tables, round to cafes, at Boulevard Batignon. Me, Halvey, Pissarro, Monet, Cassatt, we joke until we turn serious about the proper subjects of art, works and working people, gleaming engines, trains, the stations full of steam, tricolored flags. Those days, no idea mattered to us. How wrong it was to make beautiful what wasn't. I painted working women who at day's end would cup poisonous absinthe in rough palms. The real is often ugly. What I meant, I was said, most women are ugly. I painted what I saw. I laid my oldest, closest friend, Halavi, the Jew, onto canvas like a corpse, a thick streak of black oil smudging the bone, white dresses of dancers. We never spoke again after Zola and the Dreyfus affair, nor did I frequent Pissarro or Cassatt. The sight of once dear friends filled me with shame. I paint what's there, not what I remember. Of light in alleys, of plains, the days reinvented art, but lonely truth of nudes, of dancers, of laundress, of horse. Thank you. So if you have some questions.
How long do you work on series, or do you go back and forth, or something's done and
Well, I work on, as you know, in various different media. This was mostly my two-dimensional work, but I work on several different things at a time. So in fact, while I've been here, I've been dealing with the business aspects of a big public art project that I'm working on now. So it's two, I'm working on two. Yerba Buena Plaza, if you're familiar with San Francisco, has now become sort of an art hub for museums in the area, large museums. And Stevenson Street leads to the back of the Jewish Museum and to the Four Seasons Hotel, the one that's shrinking or sinking. And so I'm doing that street over, and then another street that spans two cities.
When you say you're doing the street over,
I'm doing
whole
all
street?
the whole street. Well, not the whole street, but I'm doing all the art. They call it art enhancement now. That changes. So I'm doing the lighting, the bollards, the pavement, the seating, those kinds of things. Yeah. It is a work in progress. Well, if you want to sit in meetings, because you're welcome to come. But this is something that the components are fabricated. For example, I'm doing the lighting. The lighting, they're 25 feet. So the drawings would be done of the lighting, and it goes on like that. Yeah. Yes.
That album that you're talking about in the 19th century, the Islands.
Oh, Island People, Blue Mountain on Island People on Blue Mountain. Blue Mountain is the place where I worked in Colorado, in Lyons, Colorado. They call it Blue Mountain.
The full title is Our Islands and Their People.
Yes, exactly. I had volume 1 and 2.
There's volumes as well. And this was mesmerizing.
Weren't you? Well, it talks about how the United States and I think other countries were colonizing all of these islands in the Caribbean and in the South Pacific. Right. Yes.
But that collage work is, I love the collage work. Hold on there, but I would love to see that anonymously or your name again, but out of the streets and posters and things. Do you ever take that work and put it out there?
Well, maybe 20 years ago, I did a series called that was all down Market Street. Market Street is one of the longest streets in San Francisco. So a similar series like that spanned Market Street. But I'm open if you know a place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.